Welcome to the Platform Engineering Playbook podcast, where everything you hear is built, reviewed, and improved by AI, by me, and by you, the listener. This show keeps me, and hopefully you, up to speed on the latest in platform engineering, SRE, DevOps, and production engineering. It's a living experiment in how AI can help us track, explain, and discuss the fast-moving world of infrastructure. Every episode is open source. If you've got something to add, correct, or challenge, head to platform-engineering-playbook.com. You'll find all the content and a link to the GitHub repo. Open a pull request, join the conversation, and make the playbook smarter. Let's get into it.
Today, we're diving into the Terraform versus OpenTofu debate. And I know, you're probably thinking another hot take on the license change. But here's what nobody's talking about. 70% of teams using Terraform purely in-house are completely unaffected by the license restrictions. Yet, they're being told to migrate immediately.
Wait, 70% unaffected? That seems counterintuitive, given how much pressure there is to switch.
Right? In August 2023, HashiCorp changed Terraform's license from the open-source Mozilla public license to the business source license. The internet lost its mind. Within months, 400 companies signed the OpenTF manifesto, the Linux Foundation forked the codebase into OpenTofu, and by April 2024, IBM paid $6.4 billion to acquire HashiCorp anyway.
$6.4 billion. That's not pocket change. $35 a share.
Exactly. And that acquisition intensified the vendor lock-in concerns. But here's the thing. If you're using Terraform to manage your infrastructure in-house, which is what 70% of teams do, the BSL license doesn't legally restrict you. Building competing commercial products or services, that's where the restrictions kick in.
So, tool vendors, consultancies, SaaS platforms.
They're the ones who face existential license restrictions. Companies like Spacelift, ControlMonkey, and Zero, they all had to support OpenTofu specifically to avoid licensing complications. But for the average platform team just managing their AWS infrastructure, the license change itself isn't the problem.
Okay, but then why is everyone saying you must migrate or you're supporting vendor lock-in?
Because IBM's $6.4 billion wasn't an act of charity. They're going to monetize Terraform somehow. The BSL license means no competitive forks, no community steering committee, and profit-driven feature gates. The strategic risk is real, even if the immediate legal risk isn't.
So it's about future control, not current restrictions.
Exactly, and that's where the conversation gets interesting. Let's talk about Fidelity Investments. They migrated 50,000 state files, managing 4 million cloud resources across 2,000 applications. 70% of their projects moved to OpenTofu in 2 quarters.
50,000 state files. That's a massive validation of the migration path.
It is, but here's what David Jackson, their VP of Automation Tooling, said, and I'm quoting here. The technical side of migration is trivial. It's organizational change management that matters.
Trivial. That feels like an overstatement.
No, he's right technically. OpenTofu 1.6.2 is a drop-in replacement for Terraform 1.5x and earlier. Same state file format. You literally swap the Terraform command for tofu, run tofu and knit upgrade, and you're done. No state conversion needed.
Okay, so technically simple, but organizationally?
That's where it gets messy. Think about what Fidelity actually had to do. They started with one internal infrastructure as code platform application, pushed it through their full CI/CD pipeline, artifact storage, governance checks, everything. Then they did a phased rollout, 5 to 10 low-risk projects first, validated for 2 weeks, then expanded.
So proof of concept, validate, expand incrementally.
Right. And they had to update CI/CD pipelines for every project. GitHub Actions workflows, GitLab CI configs, Jenkins files. Documentation had to be updated. Team training. They designated OpenTofu champions as go-to experts. This took 6 months to hit 70% migration.
6 months for a technically trivial change?
Because it's 90% organizational change management, 10% technology. You're asking developers to change their muscle memory. Terraform plan becomes tofu plan. IDE plugins need updating, shell aliases. And if you hit any provider version conflicts during rollback testing, you need someone who knows how to debug that.
So when people say, just switch, they're dramatically underestimating the coordination effort.
Completely. And here's another complexity. If you're deeply embedded in Terraform Cloud or Enterprise with custom Sentinel policies, workspace orchestration, CI/CD pipelines tightly coupled to TFC APIs, migrating means weeks of engineering work to replicate those workflows on alternatives like Spacelift or M0 or Scalar.
So Terraform Cloud lock-in is its own separate problem from the open source versus proprietary debate.
Exactly. And this is why I said the just switch narrative is bad advice. You need to understand your specific constraints. Let me give you a decision framework.
Please, because right now it feels like ideology versus pragmatism.
It's 3 factors. First, Terraform Cloud lock-in. If you have deep integration, custom policies, orchestration, APIs, the migration cost is high. You're looking at weeks of engineering work, not a weekend project.
And there's no drop-in Terraform Cloud replacement.
There are alternatives, Spacelift, M0, Scalar, but you have to rebuild custom workflows. Second factor, compliance requirements. If you need state file encryption, OpenTofu is your only option.
Wait, Terraform doesn't have state encryption?
The community has been requesting it since 2016, most upvoted issue on HashiCorp's GitHub for over 5 years. Add support for encrypting state files. HashiCorp's answer has always been use S3 server-side encryption, AWS KMS, or third-party backends.
Backend-specific workarounds instead of client-side encryption.
Right. And for organizations in finance, healthcare, government, encryption at rest requirements can't be met with backend workarounds alone. They need client-side encryption before the state file even leaves the execution environment.
OpenTofu 1.7 shipped that in 2024. Native client-side encryption supporting PBKDF2, AWS KMS, GCP KMS. Works with both local storage and remote backends. After 5 years of community requests, HashiCorp never built it, but OpenTofu delivered in their second year?
Yep. And Terraform's response in 1.1.0 was ephemeral resources, which solves secrets leakage for specific resources, but doesn't encrypt the entire state file for compliance.
So, if you're in a compliance-heavy industry and you need state encryption, the decision is made for you. OpenTofu is the only option.
Exactly. This feature alone justifies migration for a specific subset of teams. And this gets to the third factor, vendor lock-in tolerance. Can you accept IBM controlling Terraform's roadmap because the BSL license means no competitive forks, no community steering committee, and profit-driven feature gates are possible?
But isn't that also true of OpenTofu if the Linux Foundation decides to change course?
Different governance model. OpenTofu is under the Linux Foundation with CNCF sandbox status as of April 2025. That means transparent community processes. Contributors from multiple organizations can influence the roadmap, not just a single company's product team.
So, open governance versus vendor control.
Right. And for some organizations, that matters. For others, vendor-backed commercial support is actually a requirement. Some enterprises mandate vendor-backed software for compliance reasons, formal SLAs, escalation paths. If you have existing HashiCorp or IBM contracts, you might be contractually bound to stay.
Okay, so let me synthesize this. The decision isn't just open source good, proprietary bad.
Exactly. Let me lay out when you should switch versus when staying makes sense. Switch to OpenTofu if 1. State encryption is required for compliance. 2. You're building infrastructure tooling, SaaS platforms or consulting services where the BSL restrictions create legal risk. 3. You're currently on Terraform 1.5x or earlier. It's a drop-in replacement with minimal effort. Or 4. Your organization values open source governance and you want to avoid vendor lock-in with IBM.
and when to stay with Terraform.
Stay if 1. You're deeply embedded in Terraform Cloud or Enterprise with custom workflows that would take weeks to replicate. 2. You have vendor contracts requiring HashiCorp or IBM support. 3. You're using Terraform 1.6 plus features that don't have OpenTofu equivalents yet. Compatibility gaps are emerging as both projects innovate independently post-fork. Or 4. You have a risk-averse culture that prefers waiting for more enterprise adoption proof points before migrating.
What about new projects, if you're starting from scratch?
Default to OpenTofu unless Terraform Cloud is non-negotiable. Open source, feature parity exists, the momentum is clear. 10 million plus downloads as of June 2025. Registry traffic increased 300% year over year to 6 million requests per day. 3,900 plus providers, 23,600 plus modules. The ecosystem is there.
And for teams that decide to migrate, what does that actually look like in practice?
Fidelity's playbook is instructive. Days 1 through 30, proof of concept. Pick one dev's project that's low risk, non-production, install OpenTofu, run tofu and knit upgrade, verify with tofu plan. If the plan shows no changes, you're good. Run tofu apply to update the state metadata. Test rollback. Can you revert to Terraform if needed?
So validate the happy path and the failure path.
Exactly. Then update your CI/CD pipeline for that one project. GitHub Actions, GitLab CI, Jenkins, whatever you use, run the full deployment cycle and make sure nothing breaks.
Days 31 through 60, phased rollout. Start with 5 to 10 low-risk projects that are on Terraform 1.5x or earlier with no Terraform Cloud integration. Migrate those, validate for 2 weeks to catch any drift or issues, then expand to 20 to 30 projects if validation succeeds.
So you're learning from each batch before expanding.
Right, and during this phase, you're doing team training. 30-minute brown bag sessions, why OpenTofu, how to migrate, where to get help. Update your documentation, runbooks, onboarding guides. Design a couple OpenTofu champions who become the go-to experts.
And then days 61 through 90?
You flip the default. New projects use OpenTofu unless teams explicitly opt out. Update your project templates, CI/CD templates, onboarding docs for new hires. The goal is 50 to 70% of projects migrated by day 90, following Fidelity's pattern. Success breeds success. The more teams migrate, the more normal it becomes.
So it's an organizational momentum play, not just a technical switch.
Exactly. And here's the key insight from Fidelity's David Jackson again. With proper planning, moving to OpenTofu is a very manageable organizational challenge, not a technical one.
So what are the common mistakes teams make during migration?
Biggest one is trying to migrate all projects at once. The Big Bang approach. No learning, high risk, overwhelming for the team. You want phased rollout where each batch teaches you lessons for the next. Second mistake is skipping CI/CD pipeline updates. Manual migrations work fine, but then automation breaks in production and everyone panics.
Yeah, that's a nightmare scenario.
Third mistake is not backing up state files first. If something goes wrong and you don't have a recovery path, you're in trouble. Fourth, assuming 100% compatibility without testing. There are edge cases, custom providers, Terraform 1.6 plus features. You need to test in dev, validate for 2 weeks, then move to production. And fifth mistake is forgetting team training. Developers get confused, adoption becomes inconsistent, people start working around the new system.
So it's really about respecting the organizational complexity.
Right. And here's what frustrates me about the just switch narrative in the community. It treats this as a purely technical decision driven by ideology. You must migrate or you're supporting vendor lock-in. But the reality is more nuanced. Some teams should absolutely migrate. If you need state encryption for compliance, you have no choice. If you're on Terraform 1.5x, it's a straightforward technical lift with clear strategic benefits.
But if you're deeply embedded in Terraform Cloud with custom integrations,
then migration disrupts operations significantly, and you need to evaluate whether the vendor lock-in pain exceeds the switching costs right now. Maybe the answer is yes. Maybe it's not yet, but you develop a migration strategy for when it becomes unbearable. That's a rational decision, not ideological weakness.
And for teams that are risk-averse and want to wait for more proof points.
That's valid too. Monitor OpenTofu's growth. Run a proof of concept in dev to validate compatibility. Migrate when organizational readiness improves. The licensing earthquake forced platform teams to confront a question they'd avoided. Do we bet on vendor-controlled tooling with commercial support, or do we prioritize open-source governance and community-driven development? The answer isn't universal.
Exactly. And that's the real takeaway here. Not everyone must migrate immediately, or staying with Terraform makes you a corporate sellout. The takeaway is you need a decision framework that accounts for your Terraform Cloud lock-in, your compliance requirements, and your tolerance for vendor control. Then you need a tactical migration plan that treats this as 90% organizational change management.
The three-factor model plus the 90-day playbook.
Right. And if you want the full analysis, we wrote a comprehensive guide with Fidelity's 50,000 state file case study, the complete decision tree, and the step-by-step migration process. Check the show notes for the link.
Because this is too important to get wrong.
Agreed. Whether you switch or stay, make it a deliberate decision based on your constraints, not just community pressure. The fundamentals of infrastructure as code haven't changed. What changed is who controls the roadmap and under what terms. That's a strategic decision that deserves strategic thinking.
That's it for this episode of the Platform Engineering Playbook podcast. Every topic, transcript, and summary you just heard lives out in the open at platform-engineering-playbook.com, where anyone can suggest updates or add insights through GitHub. If you've got thoughts, fixes, or new ideas, open a PR. And if you enjoyed the episode, rate us on your favorite podcast platform. We're always shooting for 5 stars. While you're there, give the project a star on GitHub. It helps others find and contribute to the Platform Engineering Playbook. This podcast is generated by AI, reviewed by AI, me and you, a community of engineers keeping our craft sharp. Thanks for listening, and see you next time inside the Platform Engineering Playbook.